Arkansas holds more than natural beauty. It hides stories that blur the line between history and legend. From ancient mound wilders and hidden caves to phantom lights and elusive creatures, the state is filled with mysteries that spark wonder and debate. Each site carries whispers of the past, leaving us to question what truly lies beneath the surface old Spanish treasure cave. If you ever find yourself driving along Highway 59 in northwest Arkansas, near the quiet stretch of land between Sulphur Springs and Gravit, you might notice a sign pointing towards something that sounds more like a legend than a destination. The old Spanish treasure cave. On the surface, it's just another limestone cavern carved by water over thousands of years. But the name alone stirs curiosity. Why treasure? What's hidden inside? And could there really be gold from Spanish conquistadors buried in the hills of Arkansas? The old Spanish treasure cave has been captivating people for over a century, not just because of its twisting passages and echoing chambers, but because of the stories that cling to its walls. To step inside is to step into a place where history, folklore, and hope all collide. Let's start with the setting. Geologically, this is what's known as a karst maze cave, meaning the limestone has dissolved over time into a honeycomb of tunnels, crawlways, and chambers. Some rooms are surprisingly large and cathedral-like, while others tighten into narrow corridors. The air is cool and damp, hovering around the mid-50s. Year-round, with that earthy mineral smell you only find underground. The walls glisten with moisture, and water drips softly into shallow pools, echoing faintly in the dark. But the cave's real draw has never just been geology. It's the legend of buried treasure that has lured generations of explorers, dreamers, and skeptics. The story goes back to the early 1700s, when Spanish conquistadors were said to have ventured into this part of what's now Arkansas. According to the tale, they were carrying immense wealth, bars of silver, gold coins, and priceless jewels plundered during their expeditions. On their journey northward, they were ambushed by Native Americans. To keep the treasure from being captured, the Spaniards supposedly carried it deep into a cave, sealed it behind rocks, and left behind maps scratched on parchment and carved into stone. Few survived, and the treasure was never recovered. That's the seed of the story, but like most legends, it has branched into many variations. In one version, a Spanish nobleman named Don Carlos Levia led the expedition. When attacked by a bear near the cave's entrance, he barely escaped alive and decided to stash his cargo inside. His descendants, according to local law, returned generations later with old maps, only to find the supposed vault empty. Another variation ties the cave to Hernando de Oto's expedition of the 1500s, suggesting some of his men, desperate and far from home, buried what little remained of their riches before perishing. Yet another tale popularized in the 1970s claims that bandits caught in a blizzard stumbled into the cave and hid their stolen gold there, never to return. Over the decades, explorers and treasure hunters have poured into the cave with shovels, dynamite, and dreams. None ever found a chest overflowing with coins, but they didn't leave empty-handed either. Fragments of a sword blade, rusted belt buckles, pieces of armor, and even coins have been discovered within the cave. The current owners, Paul and Tracy Linscott, say they've pulled up a gold bracelet and artifacts that undeniably point to old European origins. For skeptics, these are dismissed as coincidences or misplaced relics. For believers, they're proof that the legend holds water. One of the most intriguing discoveries happened during a drought when water levels dropped inside a sealed portion of the cave. Carved symbols were revealed on the walls, pointing toward what seemed to be a hidden chamber. The owners began to dig, hoping to uncover something significant. But as the rains returned, water flooded back in, halting the excavation. The chamber remains sealed, its contents, if any, still a mystery. That's the magic of this cave. Even without piles of gold, there's always the suggestion of almost found, almost uncovered, just one step away from discovery. That feeling is what keeps the legend alive. Today, the old Spanish treasure cave operates not as a mining site, but as a tourist attraction. Guided tours wind through a mile or so of its passageways. The paths are lit, the footing is mostly easy, and guides are quick to share both the history of the cave and the wilder stories attached to it. You'll pass through places named the Cathedral Room, with its high ceiling and echoing acoustics, and the Theatre Room, where in recent years the owners have actually hosted movie nights. Yes, complete with popcorn in a cave. Visitors describe the tours as relaxed and friendly, with a personal touch that makes the experience feel more like being let in on a secret than shuffled through an attraction. Outside the cave, you can pan for gems and fossils, shop for rocks and souvenirs, or just sit and imagine what might still lie undiscovered under your feet. What makes this place special isn't just the treasure story, it's the way the cave blends hard fact with possibility. On one hand, you've got a genuine geological wonder, a limestone cavern that speaks to the natural history of Arkansas. On the other, you've got artifacts and oral traditions that leave the door cracked open to mystery. And between those two, you have the human imagination, which always hungers for a story of hidden fortune waiting to be claimed. Not every visitor comes away convinced. Some roll their eyes at the talk of conquistadors, making it this far north, pointing out the lack of solid evidence in historical records. Others think the so-called artifacts could easily have been lost by early settlers or planted to enhance the legend. But even skeptics often admit the cave itself is beautiful, and the idea of hidden treasure adds a layer of excitement you don't get in every cavern tour. If you visit today, you'll notice both the positive and the challenges. On the positive side, it's affordable, family-friendly, and off the beaten path, so you're not jostling with huge crowds. The guides genuinely seem to enjoy what they do, and there's a welcoming small-town charm to the whole operation. On the other hand, parts of the cave are still under exploration, meaning some areas are closed to the public. If you're expecting a flashy theme park-style setup, you might be disappointed. This is a quieter, more personal kind of attraction. And like all caves, it's damp, slippery in places, and not ideal if you dislike confined spaces. Yet even with those limitations, there's a feeling here you can't quite shake. When you stand in the dim light, listening to water drip in the silence, it's easy to imagine torches flickering centuries ago. The sound of boots scraping over stone, and the hurried whispers of men hiding something they desperately wanted to protect. Whether that something was piles of gold or just their own survival is another question. So, is there really treasure hidden in the old Spanish treasure cave? No one can say for certain. The best estimate, if you believe the legend, puts the value at around $40 million. But maybe the real treasure isn't gold at all. Maybe it's the thrill of mystery, the sense of standing in a place where history and myth blur together, and the possibility that tomorrow someone might finally uncover the truth. For me, that's what makes the old Spanish treasure cave worth the visit. You may walk out with nothing more than a few souvenirs from the gift shop, but you'll also walk out with a story, one that has been passed down, reshaped, and kept alive for hundreds of years. And that story, whether fact or fiction, has a value that doesn't need to be measured in coins. Plum Bayou Mounds. When you drive through the flat, fertile lands of central Arkansas, you might not expect to find one of the state's most important ancient sites. Just outside of Little Rock, tucked along the Arkansas River, stands the Plum Bayou Mounds, also known for years as Toltec Mounds. Today, this place is recognized as one of the largest and most impressive mound complexes in the lower Mississippi Valley. But what makes it fascinating isn't just its size. It's the mystery of the people who built it and the fact that so much about their culture has faded into silence. The Plum Bayou Mounds date back over 1,000 years, with construction beginning around 600 AD and continuing until about 1050 AD. That means the mounds were already standing centuries before Europeans ever set foot in Arkansas. This wasn't a small camp or a seasonal village. It was a carefully planned ceremonial center built by a culture we now call the Plum Bayou people. Archaeologists gave them that name because they were centered in the Plum Bayou region of the state. But their true name, what they called themselves, has been lost to history. When you walk the grounds today, you can see 18 different mounds spread across the site. Though originally there may have been more, 2 of them are especially large. The biggest stands about 49 ft tall, towering over the flat delta landscape. To build something that massive using only baskets of earth carried by hand shows an extraordinary level of organization and cooperation. It wasn't the work of a single generation. It took decades of construction, probably involving entire communities working season after season to pile up soil, shape it, and pack it down. But here's the puzzle. Unlike the Mississippian culture that came later and built mound centers like Cahokia in Illinois, the Plum Bayou people didn't construct grand cities or leave behind stone carvings. They didn't build defensive walls around the site, and they don't appear to have had the same kind of powerful chiefs that ruled Mississippian centers. Instead, their mounds seem to have served ceremonial, ritual, and perhaps astronomical purposes. And that brings us to one of the most intriguing aspects of the Plum Bayou Mounds, their alignment. Archaeologists have found that the placement of the mounds isn't random. Many of them line up with the solstices and equinoxes. In other words, the Plum Bayou people were tracking the movement of the sun across the sky. Imagine standing at the center of the site on the longest day of the year, the summer solstice, and watching the sun rise exactly in line with a specific mound. This wasn't just coincidence. It was a deliberate design showing that the builders had advanced knowledge of astronomy. Why was this so important for ancient cultures? Knowing the cycles of the sun wasn't just about curiosity. It had everything to do with survival. These people were farmers, growing crops like squash and sunflowers, and later maize. Timing the planting and harvesting seasons was crucial, and aligning ceremonial centers with the sun may have been a way to keep track of the agricultural calendar. It may also have had spiritual significance, tying the community ceremonies to cosmic events. Despite these insights, the Plum Bayou culture remains mysterious. They didn't leave behind written records. Most of what we know comes from pottery, tools, and the mounds themselves. Their pottery is distinctive, often decorated with simple geometric designs or punctuated patterns. Some vessels show evidence of being used in rituals, perhaps feasts or offerings. But beyond that, there's little to tell us what their belief system was like or how their society was structured. By around 1050 AD, the Plum Bayou people stopped building mounds. Not long after, they seem to have abandoned the site altogether. Why? That question has haunted archaeologists for decades. Some suggest that changes in climate or environment may have made farming harder. Others think new cultural groups, including the Mississippian people, may have spread into the region and influenced or displaced the Plum Bayou culture. It's also possible that internal changes like shifts in leadership, belief systems, or social organization led them to move away. Whatever the cause, the Plum Bayou Mounds were left behind, standing silently as the centuries passed. When Europeans eventually arrived in Arkansas in the 1500s, the site was already ancient. Local native groups like the Quapaw, who later lived in the area, did not claim to have built the mounds. This deepened the sense of mystery, leading early settlers to speculate about who could have created them. Some even imagined lost civilizations or exotic groups, but modern archaeology has firmly established that the builders were native peoples whose descendants still live across the southeast. For many years, the site was misnamed Toltec Mounds because early settlers mistakenly believed it had been built by the Toltec people of Mexico. That misunderstanding stuck for generations. But in recent decades, scholars and native communities pushed for the correct recognition. Today, the name Plum Bayou Mounds honors the local culture that actually created the site. Walking through the site now, you can almost feel the weight of history. The Arkansas landscape is quiet, the river flowing nearby, and the mounds rise up like green hills on the flat horizon. Visitors often describe a strange mix of calm and awe, standing where people gathered 1,000 years ago for ceremonies that are still a mystery to us. It sparks the imagination. Were these gatherings joyful celebrations of harvest? Were they solemn rituals calling on the spirits of the sky and earth? Or were they political meetings that helped keep different communities united? The site is protected today as Plum Bayou Mounds Archaeological State Park, managed by Arkansas State Parks. Visitors often describe a strange mix of calm and awe. Standing where people gathered 1,000 years ago for ceremonies that are still a mystery to us, it sparks the imagination. Were these gatherings joyful celebrations of harvest? Were they solemn rituals calling on the spirits of the sky and earth? Or were they political meetings that helped keep different communities united? The site is protected today as Plum Bayou Mounds Archaeological State Park, managed by Arkansas State Parks. Fertile soil made farming possible, and the open sky gave a perfect view of the sun's path. At the same time, the site faces challenges. Like many archaeological locations, it has been damaged in the past by looting, farming, and erosion. Preservation efforts today focus on protecting the mounds from further harm and educating visitors about their importance. For native communities, the site also holds cultural and spiritual value, serving as a reminder of the long history of their ancestors in the region. The mystery of the Plum Bayou people isn't just an academic puzzle. It raises bigger questions about how societies rise, change, and sometimes vanish. We can see their achievements in the massive mounds, the careful alignment with the sun, and the artifacts they left behind. But the reasons for their decline and disappearance remain uncertain. In that way, the site speaks to the fragility of human cultures and the way time can erase so much, leaving only fragments for us to piece together. Standing there today, it's impossible not to feel connected to something bigger. The Plum Bayou Mounds remind us that long before Arkansas was part of the United States, long before European explorers, there were thriving, intelligent, and creative people living on this land. They watched the same sunrises and sunsets, marked the passage of time, and built monuments that still stand 1,000 years later. If you ever find yourself in central Arkansas, visiting the Plum Bayou Mounds is worth the trip. It's not a loud or flashy place. There are no towering ruins of stone, no elaborate carvings. Instead, its power lies in its quiet endurance, in the way grassy mounds rise steadily out of the earth, whispering of a culture we may never fully understand. And maybe that's the heart of the mystery. The Plum Bayou people are gone, but they left behind a place that still makes us wonder, still challenges us to look at the past and imagine the lives of those who came before. Gurdon Light. If you head deep into the small town of Girden, Arkansas, there's an old stretch of railroad track that carries one of the most persistent ghost stories in the state. It's called the Gurdon Light. And for decades, people have come out here to witness a strange, floating orb of light that appears along the abandoned rail line. Some say it's the spirit of a railroad worker carrying his lantern. Others think it's natural swamp gas, or even some kind of unexplained atmospheric energy. But whatever it is, the Girden Light has become one of Arkansas's most famous mysteries. The story begins back in the early 1930s. Girden was a quiet railroad town at the time, a place where life revolved around the tracks that carried trains hauling timber and freight. One night, locals began reporting a strange, glowing light hovering along the tracks just outside of town. It wasn't a constant thing. It appeared at odd hours, sometimes flickering faintly, other times shining bright enough to light up the surrounding trees. Word spread quickly, and before long the mystery light became a piece of local folklore. The most popular legend ties the light to the violent death of a railroad worker. According to the story, a foreman named William Mlan was bludgeoned to death with a railroad spike during an argument with a co-worker in the 1930s. The killer was caught and executed, but people believe Mlan's spirit never left the tracks. They said the glowing orb was the ghostly image of his lantern swinging back and forth as he searched for justice, or maybe even for his severed head, depending on which version of the tale you hear. Others connected the light to an even older story about a railroad worker who lost his head in an accident along the tracks. In that version, the light is his lantern as he wanders the night, still trying to finish his shift. These ghostly worker stories were common in small railroad towns across America. But what made Girden different is that people kept seeing the light long after the legend formed. By the 1960s and 70s, the Gurdon Light was well known beyond the town itself. Teenagers would drive out at night, park near the tracks, and wait in the dark. Sometimes a faint glow would flicker in the distance, dancing just above the horizon. Sometimes a single bright orb would appear, hover in place, and then vanish. Stories spread of the light moving toward people, swaying as if carried by an invisible hand, or splitting into two before rejoining as one. What's interesting is that the Girden Light wasn't just campfire talk. It's been documented by newspapers, television crews, and even university researchers. In the 1990s, a team from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock investigated. They set up equipment to test whether car headlights from a nearby highway could be causing the effect. Their conclusion was surprising. While headlights might explain some instances, they couldn't account for all of them. The Girden Light often appeared when there were no cars on the road, and it seemed to float in ways that didn't match the path of distant lights. Skeptics have suggested other natural explanations. One theory is swamp gas methane rising from the damp ground and igniting. The problem with that idea is that Girden doesn't really sit on swampy land, and the light doesn't behave like flickering gas flames. Another possibility is something called piezoelectric effect. The area around Girden is rich in quartz crystal, and when pressure builds up underground, like from shifting rocks or small seismic activity, it can release electrical energy. Some scientists think the Gurdon Light might be a rare case of natural Earth energy manifesting as visible light. Still, no explanation has ever been proven, and that's part of why the mystery endures. For locals, the Gurdon Light is less about science and more about tradition. Families have been telling the story for generations, and every Halloween groups still head out to the tracks hoping to see it. It's one of those rare mysteries where the folklore and the sightings feed into each other. The more people talk about it, the more people go out there. And the more people go, the more stories there are about what they've seen. I've read accounts from people who swear they've watched the light hover just a few feet away, glowing white with a faint bluish tint. Others describe it pulsing in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Some say it seems to react to movement, darting away if you approach too quickly. Whether those are tricks of the eye in the dark or something truly unexplainable is up for debate. Today, the Gurdon Light is one of Arkansas's biggest roadside attractions, though it's not advertised like a theme park. You won't find billboards or guided tours. It's more of a word-of-mouth destination, something you hear about from a friend or a local. If you want to see it, you drive to the edge of town, follow an old dirt road, and hike along the tracks at night. It's quiet out there, with only the sound of crickets and the rustle of the woods around you. The atmosphere alone is enough to send a shiver down your spine, even before you see anything unusual. But not everyone is a fan of people wandering the tracks at night. The area is still near active rail lines, and there have been concerns about trespassing and safety. Locals warn visitors to be cautious, and authorities have occasionally tried to discourage ghost hunters. Despite that, the light remains a steady draw. People come from all over Arkansas, Texas, and beyond, just to say they've stood where the ghostly glow has appeared. What makes the Gurdon Light so compelling is that it sits right on the border between folklore and science. On one hand, you have a chilling ghost story rooted in real historical tragedy. On the other, you have serious researchers who admit they can't fully explain what people are seeing. That balance keeps it from being dismissed as just another roadside hoax. Even if you don't believe in ghosts, there's something undeniably intriguing about a light that's been reported for nearly a century, always in the same spot by thousands of different people. At the very least, it's one of those mysteries that reminds us how much we still don't know about the natural world. If you ever make it to Girden, you'll find a small town with a big legend. The railroad no longer dominates life here the way it once did, but the tracks still cut through the woods, and the stories still echo among the people who live nearby. Some will tell you straight face that the light is real and that they've seen it. Others will shrug and say it's just headlights or imagination. Either way, the legend has become part of Girden's identity, and maybe that's the real power of the Gurdon Light. Whether it's a restless spirit, a geological anomaly, or just a trick of the night, it's something that brings people together. It sparks curiosity, wonder, and a touch of fear. All the things that make ghost stories last. If you visit today, you might leave without seeing anything at all. Or you might catch a flicker, a glow, something hovering just out of reach in the dark. And in that moment, whether you believe or not, you'll understand why the mystery of the Gurdon Light has survived for so long. Boggy Creek Monster. The folk monster, often called the Boggy Creek Monster, is one of Arkansas's most enduring mysteries. It's a legend that blends folklore, eyewitness accounts, and a bit of Hollywood influence into a story that has haunted the small town of Fuck for decades. Some call it Arkansas's version of Bigfoot, but the locals will tell you it's something far more unique, and the stories that surround it make this one of the South's most famous cryptid tales. The first widely reported sightings of the creature go back to the early 1970s, though locals claim it had been lurking in the swampy lowlands of Miller County long before then. Descriptions are fairly consistent. A large, hairy, man-like figure standing around 7 feet tall, weighing perhaps 300 lb or more, and covered in dark hair. Witnesses often say it has a foul odor, something like a mix between a skunk and a wet dog, and that it moves with surprising speed and agility for its size. Unlike Bigfoot sightings in other parts of the country, the Fuke monster is almost always tied to the swamps, creeks, and thick bottomlands of the Sulphur River area, especially around Boggy Creek. The story exploded into public awareness in 1971 when Bobby and Elizabeth Ford reported a terrifying encounter at their rural home near Fuck. According to their account, the creature tried to break into their house one night. Bobby claimed he shot at it multiple times with a rifle, though there was no clear evidence that he hit it. Elizabeth described seeing a hairy hand reach through a window screen. They said the animal left claw-like marks and damaged the siding of the house as it tried to get in. The Fords were so shaken by the incident that Elizabeth was treated for shock at a local hospital. The next morning, investigators found tracks around the house, 3-toed prints, which added a strange twist since most Bigfoot reports describe 5-toed creatures. This incident was heavily covered in newspapers, sparking curiosity and fear. Soon, hunters, reporters, and curiosity seekers were flocking to Folk. The town became a hotbed of attention, and people began combing the swamps in hopes of catching a glimpse of the mysterious beast. Some claimed to have seen it dart across a road. Others swore they heard its eerie, echoing cries in the night. More tracks were reportedly found, and while some experts dismissed them as hoaxes, others couldn't explain them away so easily. The legend really cemented itself in American pop culture when filmmaker Charles B. Pierce released The Legend of Boggy Creek in 1972. This low-budget docudrama mixed real interviews with dramatized reenactments of alleged encounters. The film leaned heavily on the story of the Ford family, but also included other supposed sightings in the Fook area. It was shot in a gritty, realistic style that made it feel more like a documentary than a horror movie, and it scared audiences across the country. Despite its small budget, the film was a surprising hit, grossing millions at the box office and helping to solidify the Fook as a household name. The movie's success turned Fuck into a cryptid tourism hotspot. Even today, fans of the legend still make pilgrimages to Boggy Creek, searching for traces of the monster. The film's popularity also led to sequels and spin-offs, though none captured the eerie authenticity of the original. But beyond Hollywood, the question remains, what exactly is the folk monster? Skeptics suggest it's nothing more than misidentifications of black bears, which are common in Arkansas and can rear up on their hind legs, looking eerily human-like. Others point to escaped exotic animals or even elaborate hoaxes designed to drum up tourism. The three-toed tracks in particular fuel doubts, since they don't match any known primates or bears. Some cryptozoologists argue that if the creature is real, the odd tracks could point to a unique unknown species. The legend also draws strength from the geography of the area. The Sulphur River bottomlands are dense, swampy, and difficult to navigate, even for seasoned outdoorsmen. It's easy to imagine that such a wild, overgrown place could hide something unknown. At night, with the sound of frogs, insects, and shifting water, the swamp can play tricks on the senses. Every rustle or splash can feel amplified. Locals who grew up near Boggy Creek will often tell you that even if you don't believe in the monster, you'll still feel uneasy walking those woods after dark. Through the years, new reports have continued to surface, though less frequently than during the frenzy of the 1970s. Some hunters and campers claim to have heard chilling screams that didn't sound like any animal they recognized. A few still report seeing a large, shadowy figure moving quickly through the trees. Others insist they've smelled the foul odor right before hearing something large crashing through the brush. Of course, the skeptics remain firm. Many say the Fuck monster is just a local legend that grew out of a few strange incidents and was amplified by media attention and the success of the film. But others argue that legends don't survive this long without some kind of truth at their core. Whether it's a misidentified animal, a cryptid, or just a story passed from one generation to the next, the Fook has become part of Arkansas's cultural identity. Today, Fook embraces its monster with pride. There's a small museum dedicated to the Boggy Creek legend, and local shops sell memorabilia for tourists who come to experience the place they've seen on screen. The annual Boggy Creek Festival celebrates the legend with screenings, speakers, and vendors, giving fans and locals alike a chance to connect over the shared story. If you visit the area now, you'll find the town of Fook is still small, still surrounded by the thick woods and waterways that birthed the legend. Walking along the quiet back roads or standing at the edge of the creek, it isn't hard to imagine something moving just out of sight in the dark tree-line. Whether it's real or not almost becomes secondary. The feeling of the place itself is enough to stir your imagination. In the end, the Fuke monster is more than just a cryptid story. It's a blend of folklore, community identity, and a little Hollywood magic. It's a reminder of how mysteries can take root in the landscape and in people's imaginations, becoming something larger than life. The swamps of Boggy Creek may or may not hide a seven-effed hairy beast, but they definitely hold a legend that has stood the test of time. And if you ever find yourself driving the back roads of Fuck late at night, with the mist rising off the water and the woods pressing close on both sides, you might find yourself glancing over your shoulder. Because in a place like Boggy Creek, sometimes the line between myth and reality feels thinner than you'd expect. Blowing Cave, Kuzman. Deep in the Ozark Mountains of north-central Arkansas sits a place that feels more like a storybook passage than a point on a map. It's called Blowing Cave, located near the small town of Kuzman in Independence County. From the outside, the cave doesn't look like much. A simple rock opening in the side of a hill, the kind you could pass by without thinking twice. But over the years, Blowing Cave has become one of Arkansas's strangest legends, tied not only to local folklore, but also to wild claims of underground civilizations, secret tunnels, and even beings that some describe as anything but human. The first thing to know about Blowing Cave is how it got its name. In the summer, when the air outside is hot and heavy, the mouth of the cave pushes out a constant stream of cool air. In the winter, when the outside world is icy and still, the cave seems to draw the air inward. Locals noticed this centuries ago and called it a breathing cave. That natural airflow is what gave Blowing Cave its identity. And it also made people wonder just how big the underground system really was. If it could inhale and exhale like a living thing, what kind of hidden chambers and passages might lie deep inside? For most of its early history, Blowing Cave was just another curiosity in the Ozarks. Farmers, hunters, and explorers sometimes poked around inside, finding narrow tunnels, underground streams, and rooms carved out by water over thousands of years. But it wasn't until the mid-10th century that the cave's reputation took a strange turn. A series of stories began to spread, suggesting that Blowing Cave was more than just a natural wonder. According to some accounts, it was a doorway into an underground world. One of the most persistent legends comes from people who claimed that explorers once ventured deep into Blowing Cave and never returned. The story goes that in the late 1800s, a group of men followed a passageway farther than anyone had before. They crawled through tight squeezes, waded across dark pools, and finally reached a vast underground chamber filled with glowing light. Some versions of the tale describe strange plants and even creatures unlike anything on the surface. Others say the men stumbled upon the remains of an ancient civilization hidden beneath the Ozarks. Whatever they found, the men didn't make it back to tell their story firsthand. Only fragments of the tale survived through rumors and retellings, fueling the idea that Blowing Cave hides a great secret. In the 1960s and 70s, the cave's legend gained new life thanks to a bizarre claim that Blowing Cave connects to a network of tunnels used by an ancient race known in folklore as the blonde-haired giants, or sometimes even reptilian-like beings. Some versions tied the cave to the hollow earth theory, the idea that advanced civilizations live inside the planet, hidden away from modern society. A few people even reported encounters with tall, pale-skinned humanoids inside the cave, describing them as friendly but secretive, like guardians of a hidden world. These claims were never proven, of course, and many skeptics point out that cave exploration often sparks exaggeration. When you're in the dark, in a place that twists and echoes, your senses play tricks on you. A shadow becomes a figure. A draft of air feels like a presence, but still, the stories of beings inside Blowing Cave haven't gone away. To this day, some fringe researchers and paranormal enthusiasts cite the cave as one of Arkansas's strangest hotspots. There's also the question of how big Blowing Cave really is. Modern cavers who've mapped sections of it say the system stretches farther than most people expect. Tight crawls open into wide chambers, and some passages go on for hundreds of feet. Underground streams run through parts of it, creating deep pools and waterfalls hidden from the surface world. And like many caves in the Ozarks, Blowing Cave connects to layers of limestone that stretch for miles. It's easy to believe that vast, unexplored sections still remain, waiting for someone brave enough or reckless enough to push farther. For locals in Kusman, though, Blowing Cave is less about hollow earth theories and more about pride and caution. The cave is part of the community's identity. Over the years, landowners have occasionally allowed tours, drawing curious visitors who want to experience the breathing cave for themselves. But there's always been a sense of danger attached to it. Caves in this region can be unstable with sudden drops, slippery rocks, and passages that flood quickly when it rains. More than one person has gotten lost inside, and rescuers warn that without proper gear and experience, it's easy to get trapped. That element of real danger adds weight to the legends. When someone disappears or has a close call inside, the old stories about vanishing explorers resurface. The cave also holds a place in Arkansas's long tradition of blending natural wonder with folklore. Just as the Ozarks are filled with ghost lights, monster sightings, and hidden treasures, Blowing Cave represents the mystery beneath the ground. For centuries, caves have been places of reverence, fear, and imagination. Native American tribes once used caves for ceremonies and shelter, leaving behind pictographs and artifacts. Later, settlers saw caves as places to hide valuables or escape enemies. Blowing Cave fits right into that cultural thread, an ordinary geological formation elevated into legend because people sense something extraordinary about it. In recent years, Blowing Cave has attracted interest from YouTubers, amateur explorers, and paranormal groups. Videos show people crawling through the narrow tunnels with flashlights, marveling at the airflow and speculating about what might lie deeper. Some swear they've heard unexplained sounds inside, like voices or machinery. Others claim the cave has a strange energy that makes them uneasy the moment they step inside. These modern accounts echo the older tales, reminding us that even in the age of GPS and smartphones, mystery still lingers in the dark corners of the earth. So, what's really inside Blowing Cave? The scientific answer is that it's a limestone cave shaped by water over millions of years. Its breathing effect comes from differences in air pressure and temperature between the cave and the outside world. When the conditions change, the cave exhales or inhales, creating that ghostly wind. There's no hard evidence to support them, but there's also no way to completely disprove them either, since so much of the cave remains uncharted, and that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the legend alive. Today, Blowing Cave stands as both a natural wonder and a canvas for human imagination. If you visit Cushman and talk to locals, you'll find a mix of pride, caution, and curiosity about the cave. Some will tell you it's just a hole in the ground with good airflow. Others will hint at strange things they've heard or seen. And if you go there yourself, standing at the mouth of the cave, you'll feel that cool wind rushing out like a steady breath. It's easy to see why people think the earth itself might be alive beneath your feet. In the end, Blowing Cave is less about proving or disproving legends and more about the power of mystery. It reminds us that even in familiar places, there are still shadows we can't explain, depths we haven't reached, and stories that connect us to generations before. Whether it's just a cave, a hidden world, or something in between, Blowing Cave continues to breathe life into Arkansas folklore and into the imaginations of everyone who dares to wonder what might be waiting in the dark.